Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the just announced merger of Roll20 and One Bookshelf. I'm going to say One Bookshelf right now. For the rest of this video, I'm going to say DrivethruRPG, and I think the reason why is everybody knows what DrivethruRPG is, and you know who's connected to Dungeons and Dragons. You're going over there to get a different tabletop role-playing game, because I don't think once you get serious about tabletop role-playing games, you set up your ratio. Right now I think the ratio should be 51% Dungeons and Dragons, 49% everything else, right? But it's very rare for anyone to get serious about tabletop. First of all, I think 1 in 20 people come in to the hobby through any other game, right? And then from there, once you get serious about Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to look at other games, and you're going to run other games, you're going to play other games, and that's really okay. And in fact, I think it makes you a better dungeon master. I don't think any dungeon master should run only Dungeons and Dragons, right? I just think they should run it as the macro, right? The 51%. Always keeping it the current version of now your primary game. I think it's really important. I think it's the only way you become a tier 1 dungeon master. Okay? All right, so you have. So basically, it was just announced. My source is Teo Sabadia. Teo Sabadia said that he tweeted this out, that it is now confirmed that DrivethruRPG and Roll20 are merging. Right. So let's talk this through and talk about what it means for Dungeons and Dragons and why this is happening. So actually, I'll do the why right now. The why of this is. It's very clear why this is happening. It's the $145 million acquisition of Dungeons and Dragons Beyond. 140. When you talk about $145 million, like absolutely no one in the tabletop role-playing game space can acquire a single part for their structure that costs $140 million. Like that's a staggering number. You could probably buy 100 entire tabletop role-playing game. You could probably buy the next. You could absolutely, in my opinion, you could easily buy Pathfinder and have money left over for 5 or 10 other indie tabletop role-playing game companies, right? And if you skipped, Pathfinder, you could probably get 20, 30, maybe 50 tabletop role-playing game companies for this kind of money. And that's just one component of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So that's what this is about. So I think the reason Roll20 and DrivethruRPG are merging together as one company is they are positioning themselves for purchase by Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. Now, why would that be? Well, first of all, both these companies want to cash out, right? Like, and they've done incredibly hard work, and I think they deserve a cash out, right? So one, Roll20, in my humble opinion, has won the VTT wars, the virtual wars of VT, virtual tabletop. Fantasy Ground, please. And then everything else is just complete scrub level compared to Roll20. Roll20 has made it very serious and really done a great job with scaling and being able to. And I think what Roll20 has done is they're good at actually servicing very nitty, very crunchy players, right? And they're the hardest to serve. I actually think there are much, much better VTTs. I think actually Runehammer Games makes a much better VTT. And then also, I think it's called Owlbear. I think Roll20 is not good because it's too complicated. It's very complicated. And I'm not, like, I got some chops when it comes to tech, and I find it crunchy and just fiddly and brittle. It's just not good. And I think that's one of the things that's really sad is we look at that's another thing that happens in the tabletop role-playing game spaces. You just get bad tech products, right? Because we don't do video game level, AAA content. We get these kind of like, it is shocking to me that D&D Beyond was able to acquire a price of $145 million. Now, the reason they did that, nothing in their tech is innovative or particularly good. But what they did do is they did that thing where it's that thing where somebody's like, "Oh, I could do that." Yeah, but you didn't. So and that's really important, right? Like, you could have, but you chose not to, right? Like, and you chose not to for like 5 years, right? And then when D&D Beyond did just make a bunch of Wikipedia pages for 5 years, all centered around Dungeons and Dragons, and just interlinked them, they got a market advantage. They got a barrier to market. Like, you can't catch up in 3 months, right? And you can't build the customer base, right? So Roll20 and DrivethruRPG are actually connecting together in order to position themselves for purchase by Dungeons and Dragons. Now, there are all, and this makes perfect sense, because DrivethruRPG and Roll20 already have relationships with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Built in, right? So what happened with D&D Beyond logically happens when they merge, right? This makes a ton of sense for both of these companies. Also, if they don't get purchased, it still differentiates them and helps them to grow farther and faster. And one of the things they can do is they can they're no longer two separate websites. They can just what they can do is they can, say, now what DrivethruRPG does is all it does is just serve up PDFs for tabletop role-playing games. Well, that's actually not simple, right? Like, I've seen some really advanced stuff happen on DrivethruRPG. I'm a huge fan of Runehammer games, specifically Index Card RPG. And when I went from 1E to 2E ICRPG, they actually had the code right to where my second edition was completely free and I never had to buy it. I could just download it direct, right? Which is really, and they do that on a lot of stuff, and they have some very, very nice. And the other thing is, Grim Jim talked about this recently. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was this whole Venger Satanis thing. So whenever there's a Venger Satanis controversy anymore, I'm always with whoever's against Venger Satanis. I don't even check the details anymore. And there's a dust up between DrivethruRPG and Venger Satanis. Who's right? Well, if you know Dungeons and Dragons, you know that true name is a thing, right? If you choose to put the word Satan in your name, you're never the good guy. Right? Like, that'll tell you who's right between DrivethruRPG and Venger Satanis, right? It's DrivethruRPG, right? And they're like, hey, if you're gonna distribute content through our website, maybe don't go trash our website externally and do a bunch of hostile marketing. I totally agree with them, right? Like, so, and that's the other. And so when that happened, Grim Jim came in, and he's a great Dungeons and Dragons commentator, in my opinion. And he spoke about this, and he said, hey, I don't like what DrivethruRPG is doing. So everybody said, well, why don't you just start up your own, PDF company? And he was very honest. He's like, they have scale, they have real effort, they have organization, and I can't do any of it. Thank goodness. Like, it's so nice to hear somebody just say, yeah, we're squawking about something we literally can't compete with. And that's, and I wish there was this much honesty everywhere, right? I wish the OSR was like, hey, we're going to spend a week and, maybe 2 weeks complaining about this brand new D&D book. But the reality is we can't create anything even half as good, right? I wish you saw this kind of honest transparency in more places. It's very refreshing, right? So Grim Jim's got it. So the reality is Roll20 and DrivethruRPG have really worked hard. They've built real platforms, real scale, real customer bases. And they are merging together right now so that they can position themselves for sale to Dungeons & Dragons, in my humble opinion. It is also my humble opinion that they will do great. Even if they're not purchased, this will help both of them. And the idea that you buy your if I can go into if I can go buy my Index Card RPG book, like Hardsuit, the latest book that they put out, and then I can hit a button and they say, hey, every single asset for the game you just bought is all automatically loaded into this VTT campaign, ready to go. I'm a lot more likely to use it. A lot more likely to use it, right? So this is good for DrivethruRPG. This is great for Roll20. And I am predicting that they will be bought before the end of 2023 by Dungeons & Dragons outright, exactly like D&D Beyond was bought. What do you think? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think this is a bad thing? And do you think they will get acquired by Dungeons & Dragons? Any other thoughts? Also, has there ever been a point where Avenger Satanis was a good guy? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.